When Thomas Winslow and his new wife Diana boarded the SS Ocean Crest for their honeymoon cruise in June 1987, they had no idea it would be the last time anyone would see them alive. The couple had married just 2 days prior in a modest ceremony in Charleston, South Carolina, and the cruise was meant to be a dream vacation, a celebration of a new life together. It was also their first time traveling outside the country. Friends described Tom as steady, thoughtful, a man who didn't talk much but always listened. Diana, by contrast, was full of life. Outgoing, optimistic, and endlessly curious, she was the one who had convinced Tom to book the Mediterranean cruise instead of a quiet cabin trip upstate. She had always wanted to see Lisbon, and the cruise's stops in Portugal and the Canary Islands seemed perfect. They boarded the ship on June 9, 1987, with matching red luggage and were assigned cabin 239, located on the starboard side, mid-deck. It was a small room, nothing luxurious, but they didn't care. It had a window overlooking the sea and enough space for the two of them to relax. The ship's crew remembered the Winslows as friendly and polite. One steward recalled Tom always carrying a small film camera, the kind that required rolls of 35mm film, snapping pictures of Diana posing at the railing or laughing at breakfast. Diana, on the other hand, often walked barefoot around the cabin deck, clutching her travel journal and jotting things down as she looked out over the water. Their days passed uneventfully for the first week. They attended the captain's welcome dinner, signed up for shore excursions in the Canary Islands, and spent time in the ship's library, where Diana borrowed a novel but never returned it. Fellow passengers saw them at cocktail hour, playing shuffleboard and enjoying each other's company in quiet corners of the ship. Then, on the evening of June 17th, they were seen dining together in the midship lounge, a casual setting where many passengers gathered nightly. They sat at a small table near a porthole, eating and laughing, seemingly relaxed. One couple sitting near them later said that Tom seemed tired, and Diana kept glancing over her shoulder, as if distracted by something. But no one thought much of it at the time. That night, they returned to their cabin, or at least that's what everyone assumed. The next morning, June 18th, the Winslows did not appear for breakfast. Not uncommon. People often slept in or took early shore trips. But when they didn't show up for their scheduled excursion tour in Madeira, the crew took notice. The shore guide went to retrieve them, but found the cabin door locked from the inside. When they finally gained entry using a master key, the cabin appeared mostly undisturbed. Their personal items were inside, Tom's shoes neatly by the bed, Diana's travel bag tucked under the desk. The bed was unmade, a room service tray was still on the small table by the window, and a ship-provided excursion ticket booklet lay untouched on the nightstand. There was no sign of the couple, no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no luggage missing, no passports taken. Their wallets were inside the locked safe, which they had never requested to access. What stood out was a detail that, at first, seemed minor. The cabin's internal phone was found disconnected, the cord cut, a clean slice near the base. Ship maintenance logs had no record of this issue. It had never been reported. Alarmed, the ship's crew began searching. Announcements were made. Fellow passengers were questioned. Had anyone seen the Winslows that morning? Had they boarded a tender early? No one had. Security reviewed what little CCTV footage was available, mostly from common areas. The last time Tom and Diana appeared on camera was exiting the midship lounge around 10:30 p.m. on the night of the 17th. After that, nothing. They never passed through the corridor toward the deck. They never visited the bar, the pool, or any other public space. Ship logs showed no evidence they disembarked in Madeira or at any other port. By the time the Ocean Crest returned to its final port of call, the Winslows were officially declared missing. Authorities in Spain, where the ship docked, began an investigation. The Winslows' cabin was sealed, pending a full forensic review. The crew was questioned, as were the passengers. Diana's parents flew in to meet the investigators. They described their daughter as cautious but adventurous, not someone who would run away, and certainly not someone who would disappear without a word. Tom's brother Richard Winslow was more skeptical. He pressed investigators to consider foul play. Tom wouldn't leave without saying goodbye, he told reporters. They didn't just vanish. Rumors spread. Some passengers speculated that the couple had fallen overboard, perhaps during a late-night walk. Others believed they may have been kidnapped. One crew member recalled Diana asking questions about staff-only areas, curious about how the ship worked. But nothing could be proven. As weeks passed, the trail went cold. The SS Ocean Crest returned to service, and the Winslows' names faded from headlines. The only thing that remained was cabin 239, sealed and silent, a room that had briefly held 2 people, and then nothing. Then, 3 weeks later, during routine maintenance, a crewman discovered something hidden deep in the ship's lower storage deck. Something that had not been logged, not supposed to be there, and inside it was evidence no one expected. The SS Ocean Crest had already departed on its next voyage when a maintenance supervisor named Eric Holden received a routine assignment: clear and inspect storage bay C, a low-access hold below Deck 3. The area was scheduled for renovation. It had served for decades as a dumping ground for unused supplies, broken equipment, and forgotten cargo. Eric had been working on the ship for 12 years. He'd heard the Winslow story from the old-timers. A honeymoon couple vanishing without a trace. Cabin 239 had become part of ship lore. Some whispered it was cursed. Others believed the couple simply got drunk and fell overboard, and management hushed it up to avoid scandal. Eric didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in logs, inventory, and maintenance reports. Storage Bay C was musty, dark, and cramped, filled with crates, old linens, broken deck chairs, and large metal drums used for transporting bulk goods. Most were labeled kitchen stock or laundry supplies, marked by faded, decade-old stencils. He moved drum after drum, checking off items on the inventory sheet. Then, something caught his eye. Tucked into the back corner behind 2 cracked crates was a large metal drum, dust-covered, and marked simply, SS Ocean Crest, June 1987. Eric frowned. That date didn't match any recent inventory. He checked the drum's number against his log. No match. He radioed the purser's office for verification. Nothing. The drum was not logged. It didn't exist on any modern manifest. The lid was sealed with 2 rusted clamps, requiring tools to loosen. Curious and slightly unnerved, Eric pried them open and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was no laundry, no kitchen stock, just damp, water-damaged items piled in a careless, almost rushed way. Right on top lay a cloth napkin, yellowed with age, frayed at the edges, and embroidered faintly with Cabin 239. Eric felt a chill. Underneath it was a velvet ring box, its hinge broken, empty inside. Next to it, a fragment of a leather watch strap, warped and brittle. And buried beneath it all, wrapped in old plastic wrap, was a folded cruise itinerary booklet. The names printed inside: Mr. Tomanas, as Winslow, Mrs. Diana Winslow, Cabin 239. Eric backed away, breath caught in his throat. The ship's captain, now a new hire unfamiliar with the 1987 incident, was alerted immediately. Spanish maritime authorities were contacted, and the drum's contents were transported to the ship's security office. The ship's renovation was halted. Storage Bay C was sealed. Forensic experts began documenting every item in the drum. The napkin was confirmed to be authentic Ocean Crest dinnerware, circa 1980s. The ring box, though empty, matched the kind issued by a Charleston jeweler Diana's family later identified. The watch strap was harder to place, but a photograph taken before the couple boarded showed Diana wearing a similar watch. There were no bloodstains, no direct evidence of violence, but the presence of personal belongings inside a sealed, unlisted supply drum set off alarms. The most unsettling part? The drum had been stored in Storage Bay C, an area only accessible to authorized ship staff. To place it there, someone would have had to remove the items from Cabin 239, seal them inside the drum, move the drum down multiple decks, hide it behind other supplies, hoping it'd never be found. Investigators searched for ship logs from June 1987, trying to determine who had access to Storage Bay C at that time. But records from that year were spotty, some lost, others incomplete. A few names of staff from that era remained, but many had since retired or died. One name stood out: Victor Harlan, a laundry supervisor in 1987, had left the ship suddenly after that cruise and was never employed on any cruise line again. Contacting him proved difficult. No known address, no recent activity. He had vanished almost as completely as the Winslows. Meanwhile, the ship's current crew began to whisper. Some had always believed there was more to the Winslow story. Now they were certain. One steward recalled the sealed cabin 239 always gave him chills. No one stayed in there for years, he said. Even after it reopened, guests complained about strange noises. Some said they felt watched. The cabin was once again sealed off, pending further investigation. Tom and Diana's families were notified about the drum discovery. Richard Winslow, Tom's brother, flew out to view the evidence in person. Holding the empty ring box in his hands, he whispered he would never take it off. Never. For the families, this wasn't closure. It was proof someone had tried to erase them. What was supposed to be a simple honeymoon cruise had become a permanent mystery, one that had been hidden in plain sight, inside a supply drum no one was meant to find. Following the shocking discovery of the sealed supply drum deep in the ocean Crest's storage hold, Spanish maritime investigators received approval to reopen cabin 239, which had been sealed for 35 years since the Winslows vanished. Over time, the room had been used for storage, then left vacant, avoided by crew and passengers alike. Some older staff whispered it was bad luck. Others claimed they heard strange sounds from inside. On a gray morning in late August 1987, two investigators, Inspector Luis Ortega and forensics officer Clara Neves, stepped into the cabin for the first time since the ship's initial investigation. The air inside was stale and heavy, dust hanging and still shafts of sunlight slicing through the porthole. The room itself was frozen in time. The furniture, original to 1987, remained. The bed frame, dresser, and small dining table all intact but layered with decades of dust. On the table sat an untouched room service tray, its dishes crusted and discolored. Next to it lay a folded napkin embroidered faintly with the number 239, similar to the one found in the drum. As they moved carefully around the room, the investigators cataloged every item, noting what was missing just as much as what remained. Suitcases gone. The Winslows' luggage was no longer in the row. Family later confirmed they had brought 2 large red suitcases and a small carry-on. None were found. Travel bag left behind. In the corner, a small canvas day bag, likely Diana's, sat covered in dust. It contained a guidebook, sunscreen, and a pen, all dated 1987. Unopened excursion booklet. On the nightstand, the couple's shore excursion ticket booklet was found, unstamped and unused. The Canary Islands tour, scheduled for the morning after their disappearance, remained intact. Phone cord cut. Just as in 1987, the cabin's landline phone remained disconnected. The cord had been cut cleanly, still frayed at the base. No maintenance logs explained this. Camera missing. Family and passengers remembered Tom's film camera, but it was not found. Only an unexposed roll of film was discovered under the bed. Maintenance hatch noted. Behind the small wardrobe, Clara spotted a maintenance access panel, part of the ship's original service architecture. It had been painted over, but scratch marks indicated recent disturbance from inside. Clara knelt down, wiping dust from the panel's edge. A faint line of scraped metal ran along the edge, possibly where the panel had been pried open. Her flashlight revealed fingerprint smudges, long degraded. The maintenance hatch was barely large enough for a person to squeeze through, leading into the ship's internal service corridors, spaces used only by staff. Clara whispered, "If they went through here, where were they going?" Louise frowned. Or were they trying to escape? The film roll was immediately secured for development. Meanwhile, the canvas day bag was reviewed. But its contents were ordinary. The real focus was the excursion booklet. Investigators noted that every single page remained untouched, except for a small handwritten note scribbled inside the back cover. "Don't go at night, wait until morning." The handwriting did not match Tom or Diana's known samples. This note, paired with the cut phone line, missing camera, and disturbed hatch, painted a chilling picture. Someone had either entered the room uninvited, or the Winslows had been fearful enough to try and leave through unconventional means. The investigators tracked down former staff members, many now retired. One steward, Miguel Rojas, remembered that night. "They were at dinner. I saw them laughing," he said. She looked over her shoulder twice, like she was listening for something. Another former crewman recalled hearing footsteps near Storage Bay C during that same week, despite it being a restricted area. But back then, no one thought to check. No reports were filed. Nothing seemed wrong until the couple was gone. When the ship's original logbooks were reviewed again, something else surfaced. A page from June 18, 1987, noting a brief power outage affecting Deck 2 and 3 service corridors for about 12 minutes, just after midnight. The entry had no follow-up or cause recorded. The Winslow's cabin was on Deck 3. Had something happened during that blackout? Had someone used the darkness to enter or exit the cabin unnoticed? The maintenance hatch, drum discovery, and now this power outage pointed to a deliberate, carefully timed sequence of events. Someone entered cabin 239, removed personal items, sealed them in a drum, and hid them below deck. All within hours of the couple's last sighting. The film roll, once developed, might be the only visual clue to what really happened that night. But even as the pieces started forming, one question lingered. Why would someone go to such lengths to erase two people from existence? The discovery of the unexposed film roll beneath the Winslow's cabin bed stirred quiet hope. Maybe, just maybe, it captured something meaningful from their final hours. But developing a roll that had been left sitting untouched for 35 years in a humid, salt-air environment was no easy task. Investigators handed the roll to Maria Alvarez, a forensic imaging specialist who had worked with aged photographic evidence before. She explained the challenge. Film this old might be warped, faded, or chemically damaged, especially since it hadn't been stored properly. Still, she carefully prepared a darkroom environment and after several painstaking hours managed to process the negatives. Amazingly, 12 of the 24 exposures were recoverable. She printed contact sheets, then enlarged the clearest images. The early photos were mundane, even joyful. Tom and Diana on the upper deck, arms around each other, with the ocean stretching behind them. Diana in a striped sundress, laughing mid-bite during breakfast on the promenade. Tom standing near the poolside bar, drink in hand, talking to another passenger, face obscured. These showed daylight, indicating they were taken early in the voyage. But the last two photos were different. Photo number 11, a dimly lit shot, clearly taken inside cabin 239. Tom is standing in the doorway, partially turned toward the camera. His expression is tense, not smiling, eyes focused on something outside the frame. Behind him, part of Diana is visible, her hand on the bed frame, head turned away. Something about the image felt rushed, unposed. A moment caught unexpectedly. Timestamp on photo via developing chemicals. June 17th, approx. 10:45 p.m. Roughly 15 minutes after they left the lounge that night. Photo number 12, blurry, almost indecipherable. It shows a hallway, likely the one outside their cabin. The image is angled awkwardly, as if taken by accident. There's motion blur, but in the distance, a figure is faintly visible, possibly wearing a dark uniform or overcoat. Maria enhances the contrast, but the face is unrecognizable. The photo appears to have been taken through the cabin's peephole or just outside the door. This shot was the final exposure on the roll. The camera, still missing, had likely been taken, but why leave the film behind? Forensic analysts and family members were shown the prints. Richard Winslow, Tom's brother, was immediately emotional. "That's Tom's serious face," he said, pointing to the doorway image. "That's how he looked when something was wrong." Diana's partial presence in the shot, her head turned away, added to the unease. Had someone entered their cabin? Were they afraid? Investigators theorized that Tom might have been documenting someone outside their room, possibly a staff member. The cut phone cord, disturbed maintenance hatch, and now the doorway photo, all suggested they may have been trying to record or capture evidence before something happened. Attention turned back to the drum found below deck. The napkin marked 239, watch strap, ring box, And now these photos, all pointed to someone removing traces of the Winslows from their cabin, hiding their belongings intentionally. A deeper forensic analysis of the drum revealed trace fibers, matching the same cloth type as the room's bedspread. It suggested that the drum contents were collected hastily, likely that same night. If the couple was removed from the room, who took them? Why hide their possessions? And most chilling of all, what happened after that final photo was taken? Investigators reopened the ship crew logs and compared them against staff schedules from June 17, 1987. One name kept resurfacing: Victor Harlan, the former laundry supervisor who had quit the day after the ship returned to port, claiming a family emergency. Victor had access to Storage Bay C, where the drum was found. He also had routine access to Cabin 239's linens and laundry pickup. It was possible he'd been in the room before or after the couple vanished. But tracking Victor proved impossible. He had disappeared, leaving behind no forwarding address and no trace of his whereabouts after 1987. With the film photos, the supply drum, and forensic clues, investigators now believe the Winslows had been targeted, their disappearance covered up, and their belongings hidden to erase their presence. But no bodies, no eyewitnesses, and no direct evidence meant the case remained technically unsolved. Still, the photo of Tom in the doorway, frozen in time, suggested one haunting truth. They knew something was wrong, and they tried to document it. The discovery of the photos left investigators with more questions than answers. Tom and Diana's final night on the ocean crest no longer seemed peaceful or ordinary. Something had unsettled them, possibly frightened them. But what remained elusive was the how. How had they vanished without any crew or passengers noticing? How had their belongings been removed from the cabin and sealed in a drum below deck? The answer might have been hidden in plain sight, in the maintenance hatch discovered behind the wardrobe in Cabin 239. Ship blueprints from 1987 confirmed that the hatch was part of a narrow service crawl space, used for wiring, pipe access, and emergency maintenance. It wasn't built for regular foot traffic, but in theory, a person could navigate it if desperate, or familiar with the ship's internal structure. Investigators requested access to the crawl space. 2 ship engineers accompanied them, opening the painted-over panel and shining flashlights into the darkness beyond. The metal walls were tight, the space barely wide enough for one person. Dust floated in the beam of their lights, and the air smelled of rust and age. About 20 feet in, one engineer stopped. "There's something here," he called back. Wedged against the wall was a scrap of fabric, torn and aged. The texture was delicate, a fragment of clothing, possibly part of a blouse or dress. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the cloth matched a shirt Diana had been photographed wearing earlier in the cruise. It hadn't been there long enough to rot, but it had clearly been stuck there for decades, caught on a jagged metal edge inside the crawl space. Its placement suggested movement through the tunnel, hurried or forced. The tunnel led to a maintenance stairwell, which in turn opened into a back corridor near Storage Bay C, the same location where the supply drum was hidden. It was now undeniable. Whoever removed the Winslows, whether they went willingly or not, had used the service corridors. Someone familiar with the ship's layout, someone with keys, knowledge, and a reason to avoid detection. Investigators now believe that the couple, or one of them, may have attempted to escape through the hatch, possibly after realizing something wasn't right. The photo of Tom standing in the doorway, his tense expression, made more sense now. If they felt watched or threatened, the service tunnels would have seemed like a safer route. But why had Diana's fabric scrap been left behind, while the rest of their belongings ended up in the drum? It pointed to one chilling conclusion. Someone intercepted them inside the ship's hidden spaces. As theories swirled, attention returned to Victor Harlan, the elusive laundry supervisor from 1987. Digging deeper into archived employment records, investigators found something troubling. Harlan had been written up twice during his time aboard for unauthorized use of staff areas, including being spotted in passenger cabin corridors late at night. No formal reprimand had been issued, but he had a reputation among staff as odd and always watching. Even more disturbing, A memo from just weeks before the Winslow's cruise detailed a missing inventory of metal supply drums. The notation was vague, marked "Resolved," but no explanation was attached. Investigators now suspected that Harlan had kept one of those drums, stored it in Storage Bay C, and sealed the Winslow's belongings inside to hide his involvement. Whether he acted alone or with others remained unknown. Family members of Tom and Diana were brought up to date. Richard Winslow stood in cabin 239, tears in his eyes, staring at the maintenance hatch. He wouldn't have. He left her, he said quietly. If they tried to escape, it means they knew they were in danger. Back in the forensic lab, technicians examined the fabric scrap further. Embedded in the threads was a tiny fleck of paint, dark gray, consistent with the ship's service corridor walls. It confirmed the timeline. Diana had moved through that tunnel before vanishing. In addition to the scrap, another item was quietly found near the drum's original location. A metal serving tray, slightly bent, with faint fingerprints still intact. The prints were too degraded to identify, but the tray's design matched those used in room service delivery in 1987. Was it left there in haste? Had someone used it to transport items from the cabin? Despite all these clues, no human remains were ever found on or off the ship. No passenger or staff member ever came forward with additional information. The case, while technically still open, felt like a wall had been reached. But the evidence now told a story. Tom and Diana Winslow had not vanished at sea. They had likely been taken from their cabin, moved through hidden service corridors, and their belongings hidden deliberately to ensure no one would ever know what happened. Someone had gone to great lengths to silence them. The final mystery was why, and who else might have known what happened on that night, deep inside the ocean crest, as the waves rolled on beneath them, and 2 lives were quietly erased. As the investigation deepened, more inconsistencies began to surface in the ocean crest's archived records. Ship management had insisted for decades that nothing unusual had happened aboard during the Winslow's cruise. Yet now, faced with recovered evidence and a hidden tunnel route that bypassed normal security, the ship's past was beginning to unravel. Attention turned to the ship's internal maintenance logs for June 1987. Investigators requested not just passenger manifests and staff schedules, but work orders, repairs, and any recorded issues that might have created opportunities for someone to access off-limits areas unnoticed. What they found was troubling. On June 16th, just 1 day before the Winslows were last seen, there had been a maintenance order issued for a pipe leak on Deck 3, not far from cabin 239. The request was marked urgent and signed off by a junior engineer named Paul Caro, but when investigators tracked Paul down, now living in southern France, long since retired, he claimed he had never signed that order. "It's not my handwriting," he said, examining a scanned copy of the document. "I remember that week. There was no leak, no work done. It's fake." The signature was forged. The fraudulent maintenance request had been used to authorize staff access to that corridor, allowing someone with clearance to be in the area, possibly to open the maintenance hatch, scout out the crawl space, or set a plan into motion. It meant whoever orchestrated the disappearance had planned at least part of it in advance. Further review revealed that 2 crew members had abruptly resigned just days after the Winslows vanished. Victor Harlan, the laundry supervisor long suspected of involvement, and a second man, Gregorio Ruiz, a night shift steward whose name had rarely appeared in prior reports. Gregorio had worked night duty on Deck 3, including the corridor near the Winslow's cabin. Investigators located Gregorio in Argentina, where he now worked at a small port as a dock worker. At first he denied any knowledge of the couple's disappearance, but when shown photos of the drum and the interior of cabin 239, his demeanor changed. "I never touched them," he muttered. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." Pressed for details, Gregorio admitted that Victor had approached him during that voyage, offering money in exchange for help moving laundry items to Storage Bay C during a night shift. Victor claimed the items had been mistakenly left behind by a previous voyage and needed to be discreetly stored. Gregorio, young and underpaid at the time, agreed. He recalled helping Victor lift a heavy drum onto a dolly, covering it with old linens and wheeling it down to the storage area. When asked if he had seen what was inside the drum, Gregorio shook his head. No, he said not to open it. I didn't ask questions. But then he added something else. The woman, Diana. I saw her once in the hallway that last night. She looked scared. I remember because she was barefoot, holding something, maybe a camera. She looked right at me. Gregorio's admission changed everything. Not only did it confirm Diana had been alive and outside her cabin late that night, but it placed her near crew access corridors, in proximity to staff, who would later resign in haste. The missing camera, presumed taken after the film was removed, was never found. It seemed more likely than ever that Tom and Diana had sensed danger, possibly tried to flee, and were intercepted. Whether they were taken alive or not could no longer be proven, but someone had worked quickly to hide their belongings, erase signs of struggle, and cover the trail. The biggest question remained: why? One possibility emerged in the form of a financial dispute. Archived billing logs from the ship revealed that Victor Harlan had received an unauthorized gratuity adjustment after the voyage, a payment listed as service bonus, far above normal. Ship management at the time couldn't explain the discrepancy. It was never reported to authorities. Investigators theorized that Victor, and possibly others, had either witnessed something criminal or been involved in silencing the Winslows to protect someone else, perhaps someone higher up, someone with influence. But with Victor dead, he had passed away in 2009, answers would be limited. In a final effort, forensic teams re-examined the drum itself. Inside the rim of the lid they found a small scratch, almost like an etching, barely visible. Under magnification, it appeared to be 3 letters. D. X. No record explained the marking. It wasn't a shipping code or supply label. Diana's middle name was Marie. Tom's was Lawrence. WDX matched neither. But it could have been a crew code, a private note, or an identifier used by Victor or Gregorio during the hiding process. Whatever it meant, it was all that was left. 35 years after 2 people vanished from their honeymoon, leaving only shadows behind, the truth had nearly slipped away. Nearly. Weeks after Gregorio Ruiz's confession about moving the drum, investigators continued combing through archived materials that had once seemed irrelevant. During a final audit of unclaimed property stored by the cruise line in the late 1980s, a forgotten cardboard box was located in a coastal warehouse near Barcelona, where the Ocean Crest had once docked regularly. Inside the box, amid unrelated items from various voyages, was a small red journal, its leather cover cracked with age, pages yellowed but intact. Embossed on the front was a name in fading gold print: D. Winslow. Investigators held their breath. Could this really be Diana's personal journal? The log number on the box corresponded to lost and found storage from 1987, meant to be claimed by the family. But due to bureaucratic failure, the item had never been processed or matched to the Winslow's missing persons file. Forensic technicians carefully opened the journal and began to read. Most of the entries detailed light-hearted travel notes, meals, sights, and musings about their honeymoon voyage. Diana's handwriting was neat, thoughtful, with occasional sketches in the margins. She described the ship's decor, Tom's bad sunburn, and their plans to tour the Canary Islands. Then, just 3 pages from the end, her tone changed. One entry stood out, the last one, dated June 17, 1987, the day they disappeared. It read, "Tom thinks I'm being silly, but something feels off. The waiter at lunch, I've seen him before more than once, but I don't think he's assigned to our deck. He was watching us again today. Tonight we're staying in Ca. Tom wants to photograph the sunset from our cabin. There was a knock on the door earlier, but no one was there when I opened it. I don't know why, but I keep thinking we're being followed." The entry ended mid-sentence with a smudge of ink, as if the pen had been dropped or the page closed quickly. Investigators were stunned. This wasn't hearsay or speculation. It was Diana's own words expressing clear unease. She had noticed someone watching them and mentioned a knock at the door, a detail that aligned eerily with the final photo, Tom standing tensely in the doorway. More troubling still was her mention of a waiter, someone who seemed out of place, possibly following them through the ship. Using archived crew rosters and passenger testimony, investigators attempted to cross-reference the waitstaff assigned to the Winslows' dining area in 1987. One name stood out: Hector Morera, a junior server at the time who had been reassigned shortly after the Winslows disappeared. Records showed he had left the ship a few months later, citing personal reasons. Hector was eventually located, living quietly in a coastal village in Portugal. When confronted with the journal entry, he denied any involvement. "I served their table once," he claimed, "but I don't remember anything unusual." Yet others from the crew recalled that Hector and Victor Harlan had often worked together, sometimes covering shifts for each other, including in areas where they weren't officially scheduled. The connections tightened. Now it seemed that Victor, the laundry supervisor, and Hector, the waiter Diana felt uneasy around, had both been near the couple during their final days aboard. Could they have been working together? And if so, why target the Winslows, a honeymoon couple with no enemies, no debts, no reason to disappear? One theory emerged: theft. The Winslows were believed to be well off, traveling with valuables, including jewelry, a camera, and cash for excursions. If Victor and Hector had intended to rob them, something may have gone wrong, and rather than risk exposure, they silenced the couple and hid the evidence. But if robbery was the motive, why hide the wedding ring box, the napkin, and other sentimental items in a supply drum? It suggested a different, more chilling intent, not just to take, but to erase them. Investigators reviewed Diana's journal again. On the inside back cover, in faded ink, she had written a single line: "If anything happens, we were in 239. A message, perhaps to be found, perhaps a plea." Now, 35 years later, it was finally read. The recovered journal, the sealed drum, the photographs, and the maintenance hatch, all separate clues, yet each told part of the same story. For 35 years, the Winslows' disappearance had remained a mystery lost to time, but now investigators believed they could finally piece together a chilling, plausible timeline of what happened aboard the Ocean Crest during that summer honeymoon cruise in 1987. Tom and Diana Winslow boarded the ship excited, newly married, and filled with hope. In every early photograph, they looked relaxed, carefree. The kind of couple who stopped to watch sunsets, who took pictures of every meal and walk along the deck. But sometime during that voyage, something changed. Diana's journal revealed that they felt watched. She had noticed a waiter, likely Hector, showing up in places he didn't belong. There were knocks at the door at odd hours. The ship was crowded, but to them it began to feel small, isolated. Then came the night of June 17th. At dinner, fellow passengers remembered seeing them laughing, yet Diana glanced over her shoulder more than once. Afterward, they returned to their cabin. Tom, perhaps sensing Diana's unease, he decided to photograph the sunset from their room, setting up the camera. The unease grew stronger when they heard another knock. No one there again. This was likely when Tom took the now famous final photo, him standing in the doorway, Diana partially visible behind him, their faces tense. At this point, they might have realized they were being targeted. Maybe they planned to stay inside. Maybe they considered alerting security, but their phone line was cut. Something prompted them to act quickly. They must have known about the maintenance hatch behind the wardrobe. Perhaps they noticed it earlier, or perhaps someone told them about it. In any case, the evidence showed that Diana went through the crawl space. Her torn clothing scrap proved that. Whether Tom followed, or whether they were separated, remains unclear. What happened inside those tunnels is known only in fragments. It's likely that whoever had been watching them intercepted them there. Perhaps Victor waited near the service corridor. Maybe Hector was involved, or others. They were taken, subdued in that narrow space, and their belongings, camera, jewelry, personal effects, were removed. But rather than keeping or selling anything, their possessions were sealed inside a supply drum and hidden far below deck. This was not a simple robbery. This was about removing them entirely. Why? Investigators believed it had to do with avoiding exposure. Victor and Hector may have been involved in other illegal activities, smuggling, black market theft, or worse, and feared that Tom and Diana had witnessed something, or had evidence. Tom's camera, especially, may have captured an image they weren't supposed to see. The perpetrators chose to eliminate the threat and hide all traces. The final clue, hidden until now, lay in ship repair records from 1988, 1 year after the incident. Documents showed that during routine maintenance, the maintenance hatch outside cabin 239 was sealed permanently, painted over, and the area closed off. No official reason was given, but the work order was signed by a supervisor who had also approved the storage bay renovations, the same bay where the drum was hidden. Someone wanted that route sealed forever. The Ocean Crest changed ownership years later, and the trail went cold. Victor died, Hector disappeared, and the ship aged into obscurity. But Diana's journal survived. Her words, "If anything happens, we were in 239," remained as a final attempt to leave a trace. And then there was the drum. Found decades later, forgotten beneath a supply shelf, it was the only reason the case reopened. If it hadn't been for that sealed container and the items inside, no one would have known to search again. No one would have returned to cabin 239 or developed the film or read the journal entry that changed everything. In the end, Tom and Diana Winslow didn't simply vanish. They were hidden, deliberately, methodically. And yet, against time and silence, their story surfaced. Not with a dramatic reveal or confession, but with the quiet persistence of evidence, of a torn fabric scrap, a photo, a journal, a drum, and a honeymoon that never ended,